Hello everyone and welcome back to the channel. My name's Jono. Back to Lightroom this time, and the last in my series introducing you to Lightroom, and we're going to talk about the ability to make some basic edits to one of your photographs. So let's jump straight in. Okay, so here we are back in Lightroom in the main screen, and I've got a few photographs imported ready in a temporary catalogue that I was just going to use for demonstration purposes. So what we're going to do, in order to make some edits, we go up to the top right here and select Develop, which will take us over to our sort of editing screen, if you like. I'm just going to highlight one of the photographs at the bottom here, and as you can see, it will show it on a bigger version. On the left-hand side, then, we have got some presets. Presets basically are a collection of changes that you might make to a photograph. Some come with Lightroom built in, some you can download for free, some you can pay for. And obviously, any changes you make to a photograph, you can change them, you can store them yourself as a preset. I have a collection, as you can see under user presets here. I've collected quite a few. The trouble with presets is that they only are the commands that you have made to the image. They only apply, really, they only work properly on the image that you made them on. If you try applying the same presets to another photograph, it doesn't always work too well. So no problem in playing around with them. But really, if you want to sort of take your editing of images seriously, you're better off actually learning the controls in Lightroom or Photoshop, whatever, and actually learn what they do themselves. But yeah, no harm in having a play with. And as you can see, as I roll my mouse over the different presets, you'll see them being temporarily applied to the image. Some work better than others. If I remove my mouse, obviously it's reset. None of those changes have actually been made. And it's worth pointing out to you that any of the changes I'm about to make aren't actually being made to the image until the image is actually exported from your catalogue. I think I've said this in previous videos. Lightroom is what's known as non-destructive. In other words, it stores anything that you alter about the image, any changes you make, it stores it separately from the image itself. And it's only either written to the image if you choose to, or that you export that image into another medium. Which is quite useful because it means at any point you can completely undo what you did and you've still got your original image there. Over on the right hand side, then, we've got all our sort of settings for making changes, making edits. The topic of post-production, if you like, on images, it's huge. There are many controls that do many different things, and you can spend a lifetime in getting truly expert at it. But I want to go through some basic ones that you'll find you either need or want to do on a quite a regular basis. And I'm going to use this image as an example. So a little bit of a backstory. This is quite an old image. It is a scanned 35mm negative, in fact, rather than a digital image. And because of that, it's not the greatest. It's a picture of my mother holding my then youngest daughter. She's not the youngest anymore, but it's about 25 years old, something like that, 20 plus years old. And it has a few imperfections, if you say. If I zoom in on the curtains, for instance, here, you'll see there are dust and scratch marks on the negative, so they've shown up. The colours are a little bit washed out. There's a red eye effect on my daughter's face, etc. There's more dust here. You'll see there's a border around the outside where the image has been scanned from the negative. Also over this side, there's a few bits and pieces, and there's some very simple things we can do to actually improve this. So let's take a look. Okay, so the first thing that I'm going to do is crop the image so it's a little bit more pleasing. I want to get rid of this sort of unnatural border, but also to balance out. There's quite a lot of space at the top of the image here that I don't really need. So let's do that. So the crop tool is here, and if I click on that, very handily, Lightroom divides the image up into thirds, which are sort of a pleasing ratio of dimensions to use. But all I can do now is simply drag the border to where I'd prefer it to be. So I'm just going to reduce the size of the image somewhat, and I'm going to take out the border that's been created by scanning a negative in the first place. Once I'm happy that everything looks okay, I can just click done here, and the image is resized accordingly. So that's a lot more pleasing, and in fact I've actually, by doing that, I've taken out some of the imperfections as well. Obviously that crop might not be to your taste. This is purely a demonstration for argument's sake. Okay, so the next thing I'd like to do is perhaps look at a couple of these imperfections. Although, as I say, we've managed to remove quite a few by cropping, but there's a couple here. And what we can use here is the healing brush. So if I have a piece of the image that I'd like to remove, we've got spot removal option here, which I can click. There's a few things that I can change on it. The size of the brush, you'll see the cursor has changed to the size of the brush I'm using, so that can be altered. How much opacity, how much of the original image is going to be allowed through, and feather, which is basically a small border around the selection I'm making. I'm just going to leave it as it is now, just to show you how this works. And it's simple. In its simplest operation, I can just hover it over the piece I'd like to remove and just click. And what it's done is it's selected another part of the image that it feels it's matched up to replace here. And it's done a pretty good job. If I wasn't too happy with that, I could simply grab hold of this and move it, and you can actually see the area of selection. So maybe if I had it there, it might be a little bit better. Can do the same up here, but this time, rather than just over one part and clicking, I can actually paint. So I'm going to just paint over that part, and again it selects another part of the image, and it's done a pretty good job. I'm happy with that. If you hold down space, the cursor changes to a hand, so I'm able to drag the image around. So there's another one I can get rid of. Maybe this one here. And like I say, most digital images, you're not going to have this issue. This is purely because it was a scan of a negative that hadn't really been looked after, if you like. It wasn't in the best condition, and so it had these dusts and scratches it on. I'm going to be doing a video in the future on how to scan negatives, by the way. It's something I get asked about a lot, and so I think it's worth doing maybe 1 or 2 videos on that. So look out for those for the future. I think that's probably about it, but I'm just a quick demonstration really to get rid of some of these bigger imperfections. And as you can see, Lightroom does a pretty good job of covering up the marks. So it's just, oops, apologies, missed there. Okay, undo that. Right, so if I just click done on there now and zoom out, oops, you can see that it's done what I've asked it to and remove those spots. If I do click this button again, it remembers the changes I've made, so that I can obviously go back and alter them, move them, etc., etc. But as I say, the done button will hide that. So that's pretty good. Happy with that. The next thing I can do is have a look at this red eye issue. So a phenomena that happens when flash is taken directly in the face of a subject. The retina, etc., at the back of the eye can reflect the red wavelength of light back towards the camera, and you get this red eye effect. I'm sure you're all familiar with it. And luckily Lightroom has a nice simple tool to actually deal with this, which is this button here. Clicking on that, I'm presented with a cursor, and what I've got to basically do is tell Lightroom how big the eye is that I'm trying to fix, and we do that by left clicking and just dragging it over the eye. Oops. So if you can see there, that's the change it's going to make, and having it positioned over the eye means that we get rid of the red. Now I've got the approximate size, I can just left click this one and it will do the same thing. So if I zoom out now, you'll see that's got rid of that issue. Nice and simple, just a purpose-built tool that does the job. The other thing I wanted to look at really was the sort of tone and the colour of the photograph. Like I say, the colours, if you like, are a little bit muted, partly because of the fashion of decoration in those days, but also, as I say, that it was old negative from a while back, and that it hadn't really been looked after, so the colours have faded somewhat. And we've got an option here to look at colours. So we've got under basic, you'll see there's quite a few tabs here. All of these, basic, tone curve, HSL color, color grading, etc., they all look at different aspects of color grading an image. But the basic one is probably the easiest one to deal with. And the first thing we can do is we can just double check the white balance. So we've got two profiles. We've got color and we've got black and white. Obviously, it's a color image, so I'll leave it on that. What I can do is I can take this dropper and I can tell the computer what is supposed to be white in this image. So if I pick one of the whitest parts I can find and select it, what I've done now effectively is told the computer, or told Lightroom, what's white, therefore it now knows how to balance out the rest of the image for colors. So you can see it's reduced the temperature of the image somewhat. It's added a bit of a tint towards the red end of the spectrum, and it's altered what the overall color mark of the image should be. If I undo that a moment, another way of doing that is that by hand, rather than just me sort of telling it what the white balance should be, I can just basically go with my own eye and I can adjust temperature of the image, so going into more cold colors or more warm colors, etc. Or I can do an overall tint of color, so obviously going into the more greens and blues or into the more pinks and reds, etc. If I just set those both back to 0 for now, oops. But just to show you how that works. Okay, the rest of the sliders then are all different aspects of the image. So for instance, we've got here the overall exposure. We can obviously reduce the exposure or increase the exposure if the image is too dark or too light. Contrast, I'm sure you're all familiar with. But we've also got some powerful tools. Let me just set these back to 0. Sorry, oops. We've also got some individuals. We can actually just change the level of highlights, so just the bright areas of the image. Yeah. Or just the shadows. Just the whites, etc. Or just the blacks. So obviously manipulating all these things can obviously make a huge difference to a photograph that isn't quite right. It has got an auto button, which if you click, it does a pretty good job usually of deciding what it feels the level should be. But obviously now, if we wish, we can obviously tweak these a little bit. But I'm happy that that's certainly improved. I will change the white balance just a little bit and just tell it that this is what is supposed to be white, and just alter that a little bit. Otherwise, skin tone and everything else does seem to be a little bit off. But yeah, those are some basic edits you can make. Now, as I say, nothing's changed onto the photograph itself. If I were to go onto the disk and show you the original image, it's all still there. And if you wish, we can either reset the whole lot, and so back to exactly the way it was when I first started, or as you could see, there was a history building up here, and I could go back and just go to a previous point in my history before moving on. So quite useful, non-destructive editing method. So let me just select another photograph and just give you another run through. This is an image I took in the Republic of Ireland last summer. Quite an interesting root formation on a very old tree. But again, a few things that not ideal with the image. It's a little bit overexposed, a little bit too sort of pale in places. The colours aren't great. So let's just have a look and see the sort of things that Lightroom can do to improve that for us. So the first thing I can do is I can just click on Auto, allow Lightroom to make some basic adjustments, which has done quite a good job. But we can also sort of add some more detail to this image, etc. So for instance, we can increase things like texture. If I just bump that right up to 100, you should better see that the sort of detail of the image is a lot greater. However, it does leave artifacts, etc. So probably shouldn't be overdone too much. But you can see the difference there while I'm zoomed in of what it makes. I can alter things like clarity and dehaze, etc. They're all options for changing the overall appearance of an image. Let me just set them back to 0 though, because that's not really what I wanted to do. Oops. But if we look at, so as I say, I'll leave the tone section of it. I'll leave that on auto because it's done a pretty good job. A couple of the things that I can do is look at it changing individual colors basically, so I can boost the greens somewhat, make that a little bit more green in its overall look. Perhaps a little more bluey. Take out some of the orange out of the image, etc. And just again alter it. A lot of this is personal taste. You're going to have to obviously experiment yourselves and see how you feel the image appeals to you. One other thing I want to do is just have a look at some vignetting, which I'm sure is a style of image that you've seen quite a lot. We can actually add some dark vignette around the outside somewhat and just make the sort of center of the image pop some more, and perhaps appeal somewhat more to you. But just going back to presets, so I've made some changes there, by the way. Obviously we can look at the before and after here by clicking this button down here. So you can see this is the image before I made any changes. This is the image now, so you can obviously compare your work. But what I did want to do was just show you, if I reset everything, what some of the presets can do. Like I say, once you are happy with what you're doing, play around with presets by all means. And as I just scroll down through these, you'll just see some are for black and white images, some are for color. But we can scroll down and just easily see the sort of thing that can be applied to an image to change it quite drastically. If we scroll down a little bit, so look at some sort of some cinematic type ones, some movie looks. This one's called Arkham. If I click it, it's actually applied to the image. But again, in a non-destructive way, I can reset at any point. But there you go. I hope that's of use to you. Basically, like I say, this is really just a very quick overview of the sort of things that Lightroom can do. In conjunction with my first 2 videos, hopefully I've given you enough information that you can get started, have a play around and see what you come up with. And I'll look at perhaps some more detailed editing in a future video, but for the introductory series, that's about it. So thank you very much. Well, there you go. Hopefully that was of use to you. More videos coming. I'm doing lots of filming at the moment. So lots of videos coming up on some different topics, not just vintage cameras and photography. So hopefully you'll enjoy those. Thanks for sticking with me. Thank you for taking the time to watch this, and we'll see you again soon. Take care.